Coming up on New Day at Arirang, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is in Moscow to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. However, he signaled little hope for peace in Ukraine after holding talks with Russia's foreign minister. The U.S. State Department says Washington's objective for the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula remains firm, despite North Korea's pledge to further strengthen its nuclear capabilities. Wall Street ended sharply lower on Tuesday, with the Nasdaq closing at its lowest since December 2020. This as investors are worried about slowing global growth and a more aggressive Federal Reserve.
Hello and welcome to New Day at Arirang. It's Wednesday, April 27th, 8 a.m. here in Seoul, South Korea. I'm Oh Seung.
And I'm Jae-in. Thanks as always for joining us this morning, because over the next hour, we'll be covering some of the biggest headlines of the day and get experts' insights on some of the key issues facing Korea and the rest of the world. Now, our top story this morning, Russia's energy giant Gazprom says it will stop sending gas to Poland and Bulgaria.
This after also added 50 Russian companies and oligarchs to its sanctions list. Kim Yo-sun has more.
Poland's government has been told that the country's gas supply from Russia will stop from Wednesday. The decision comes on the heels of Poland's announcement on Tuesday that it was imposing sanctions on 50 entities and individuals, including Russia's largest gas company, over Moscow's ongoing military aggression in Ukraine. It also follows Poland's refusal to pay for gas in Russian rubles, which Russia had demanded. Following the news, Polish authorities say the country's energy supplies were secure.
Our gas storages are 76% full. This is a high level, much higher than in most European countries. Therefore, also in this transitional period before the Baltic gas pipeline is launched, we will be able to draw on our resources as well as obtain gas from all other possible directions.
Bulgaria was also told that gas deliveries from Russia's Gazprom would be halted. As the country relies on the Russian energy giant for over 90% of its gas supply, Bulgaria's energy ministry says it has begun steps to find alternative sources. Meanwhile, hosting over 40 countries, including South Korea, Australia, and Israel, for defense talks in Germany on Tuesday, Washington stressed that the coming weeks would be, quote, critical.
So we've got to move at the speed of war. And I know that all the leaders leave today more resolved than ever to support Ukraine in its fight against Russian aggression and atrocities.
The Pentagon chief also welcomed Berlin's decision to send heavy weaponry to Ukraine for the first time. Against this backdrop, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged for a ceasefire during his visit to Moscow while he sat down with Russian President Vladimir Putin. During the meeting, Putin said he hopes for a diplomatic agreement, while the UN chief reiterated calls for aid and the setting up of an evacuation corridor to help Ukrainians. These developments come as Ukrainian officials say they are concerned by attempts to worsen the security situation in Moldova's pro-Russian breakaway region. They also added that Russian forces are trying to surround Ukrainian defensive lines in the east as they intensify attacks in the region. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Washington will continue to work towards the denuclearization of North Korea. Now, that's according to a U.S. State Department official on Tuesday in an interview with Yonhap News Agency. This follows comments from North Korean regime leader Kim Jong-un at a recent military parade, where he said that although the North's nuclear weapons are fundamentally a deterrent, use cannot be limited to that purpose if the regime is in what he called an unfavorable situation. The U.S. official added that North Korea's intention to expand its weapons program is a serious threat to international peace and security. North Korea showcased some of the regime's latest weapons during the military parade on Monday, including the Hwasong-17 ICBM, the Hwasong-8 hypersonic missile, and a new type of submarine-launched ballistic missile. In his farewell interview, President Moon Jae-in once again urged the resumption of dialogue with North Korea. While refraining from making a comment on the regime leader Kim Jong-un, Moon said that he thinks highly of former US President Donald Trump. Yoon Jung-min with the details.
President Moon Jae-in has urged both the incoming government and North Korea to make efforts to return to dialogue. In a farewell interview with local broadcaster JTBC on Tuesday, he refrained from making a comment on North Korean leader Kim Jong-un because he said it was not a proper time to make an assessment, given that Pyongyang has resumed intercontinental ballistic missile tests.
나는 이제 새 정부가 당연히 대화를 복원하기 위한 노력을 미국과의 긴밀한 공조 속에서 해 나가야 한다고 생각하고 북한도 빨리 대화의 장으로 돌아와야 한다고 생각합니다. 북한이 대화라는 합리적인 선택을 해주기를 바라는 것이고.
Though there wasn't further progress on nuclear talks with North Korea, he said it was true that his government has switched to a dialogue atmosphere from when North Korea was increasing threats in 2017. Regarding the Inter-Korean Summit in 2018, Moon said the regime wanted a security guarantee and the easing of sanctions for denuclearization, and Kim Jong-un wanted to resolve the U.S. distrust of the North. Moon says Seoul had to play a bridging role between North Korea and the U.S. for the summit, as they both wanted to relay a message to each other through South Korea. When asked about former U.S. President Donald Trump, President Moon said he thinks highly of him for his efforts for talks, despite there not being that much support within the U.S. for a summit with Kim.
그런 것을 무릅쓰고 또 아까 말한 실무적인 어떤 합의 과정 같은 거 없이 톱다운 방식으로 북한의 김정은 위원장을 직접 만나서 설득을 해보겠다.
Regarding his proposal of an end-of-war declaration, Moon says Seoul and Washington have coordinated on the issue, but there's a long way to go. He criticized those who argue that Seoul should possess nuclear weapons and said he is concerned about nuclear proliferation in Northeast Asia. On the Seoul-Tokyo relationship, the president said the problem occurred as Japan has turned to the right during the Abe administration. He refrained from making a comment on the former Japanese Prime Minister's leadership, though he said personally Abe was a polite person. Regarding the relationship with China, President Moon called for practical diplomacy, maintaining a harmonious relationship with Beijing based on the strong Seoul-Washington alliance. He added South Korea should not be asked to make a choice between them. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Now, of course, Seoul and Tokyo relations have been especially poor in recent years. Now, President-elect Yoon is looking to change this. His delegation to Japan met with Prime Minister Kishida, who agreed the urgent need to improve ties. Kim Do-yeon has the details.
South Korean President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol's delegation to Japan says Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is on the same page as Yoon in repairing the bilateral relationship, which is at its lowest point in years. On Tuesday, the delegation led by lawmaker Chung Jin-seok met with Prime Minister Kishida for around half an hour and delivered Yoon's vision on relations with Japan as well as a personal letter to Kishida. According to the Japan Times, during the meeting, Kishida said that with the rules-based international order threatened, strategic cooperation between Seoul and Tokyo, as well as a trilateral relationship including the U.S., is more necessary than ever. The comments were made when referring to the recent series of missile tests done by North Korea and the war in Ukraine, adding there's no time to spare. Kishida also briefly addressed the core issue of the current low point in the two's relationship, history, saying that the ongoing issues over wartime forced labor, among other things, need to be resolved. Yoon's delegation said that the incoming administration is aware of the weight of the situation and that they will make diplomatic efforts to please all parties. Also, the delegation said the two agreed to create more opportunities to expand civilian exchanges between the two countries in order to regain trust. Chung and his team also met with travel and airline companies the day before, highlighting the need to resume direct flights between Seoul and Haneda Airport near Tokyo, as well as lifting mandatory quarantine when traveling between the two countries. As for the invitation to Yoon's inauguration ceremony in May, when asked by reporters, Chung said it's not a conventional method diplomatically to invite a head of state. Instead, Kishida would have to show his interest first. No specifics were talked about, but if Kishida does want to attend, the incoming administration will be prepared to welcome him. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
It's now time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. Of course, one of the top priorities for the incoming Yoon administration is tackling real estate issues, as many blame the current Moon administration for implementing a large number of unnecessary measures, only to see prices continue to rise.
But since real estate issues are never easy to solve, all eyes are on how the next government is going to approach it. And to get an insight on the real estate policies of the next administration, we connect with Oh Jun-seok, professor at Sookmyung Women's University School of Business. Hello, Professor Oh. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. And well, first off, now, many were left scratching their heads when President-elect Yoon picked Won Yu-dong, former Jeju governor, to head his land policies, his real estate policies. So why do you think he made this choice?
Former Jeju Governor Won Yu-dong, as you mentioned, was tapped as Minister of Land, Infrastructure and Transport. President-elect Yoon said Won has a great understanding of real estate policy. Won has pledged to scrap a current tenant law and is likely to implement major changes to real estate policies. I'm not the person who knows what's going on inside, but I could understand the signal what President-elect Yoon tried to keep sending in the market. It might be natural only when a few holding abundant capital in hand can access the market, definitely the price will be skyrocketed. Regulations of LTV and DSR have restricted strictly people from housing loan. You can imagine what happened when the public golf course changed into the classy private club. Yoon administration wants to return to the public club. At this moment, it would be the right person who has administrative knowledge and experiences of tackling with regional development plan by law and regulation and fighting against the politicians, not professors. And the conundrum of real estate in Korea has become messier, mainly due to political and government intervention. What to do now is to restore the autonomous situation of real estate transactions where market mechanism works, enlarging and enriching participants by getting rid of redundant regulations in one side and protecting political pressure on the other side simultaneously.
You know, despite, I guess, many of these South Koreans really wanting the next government to tackle the real estate issue first as the top priority, I mean, we already know that the Yoon administration is going to be sort of revealing their real estate policies kind of on a later date. They've already announced this. But nevertheless, Professor Oh, how do you kind of predict the Yoon administration to tackle these issues or some of their real estate policies moving forward?
It seems Yoon administration might differentiate two approaches in real estate policies. First, weight shifting from regulation to market approach. President-elect Yoon put forward many pledges to ease regulation to boost housing demand, such as expanding supply, easing the regulation to mandate the restitution of surplus profit generated by housing reconstruction, revising the regulation to cap the price of the apartment and increasing credit line and so on. And secondly, supply side drive approach. In an ordinary market, definitely consumer has the negotiation power over the seller. But quite differently, in the real estate market, supplier with inelastic supply curve has the negotiation power to control the market because there are at least 3 years of time lags, especially in Korea, between demand and supply. When you thought of yourself that you need a house, it is very hard to delay your purchase plan for more than 3 years. While the suppliers can control the construction plan and even delaying the project could be possible depending on the cost-benefit analysis. That is why the current government had tried to control the elastic demand curve, relatively easier to control. It is, however, when the government press the demand side down and down, it triggers a stabilizing mechanism, turning on the supply constriction for some lapse of time, eventually pumping price up and up. Everybody knows this expectation. However, it is noteworthy as well at this moment, a hurried easing of regulation could keep the pledge made, could send the wrong signal to the real estate market.
And Professor Oh, President-elect Yoon, he pledged to increase the loan-to-value ratio to 70% for single households and 80% for first home buyers. Now, first-time home buyers, I mean. But will this work, though? I mean, wouldn't this push up housing prices all the same?
Yes, it could possibly trigger a surge in home price. I suppose it might be an interim policy with a destination toward deregulating LTV, which might be desirable on condition the interest rate keep on increasing. When the more buyers with wide preferences can access to the financial institute, the more influence they could have over suppliers, which will help to stabilize the price in the housing market. This deregulation should be backed up and in line with the progress of increasing supply in a specific region. A single change in real estate policy can impact the overall economy by creating chain reaction in the perfect storm crisis of global interest rate rise and inflation. Real estate accounts for almost 80% of the average household assets in Korea. It is certain that cautious steps are needed in real estate market, far from political gestures. While the new government are expected to reduce the burden of transfer income tax to encourage more supply, there are many multiple homeowners who take it differently as a sign to hold out longer. So we have to be more cautious about their policy decision making.
Professor Oh, I wish we had some more time because I'm sure a lot of people have questions when it comes to real estate, but unfortunately we are out of time. Thank you as always for your insights and looking forward to talking to you again.
Thank you for inviting me.
Turning to Wall Street now, where the Nasdaq on Tuesday saw its lowest close since December 2020. The tech-heavy Nasdaq composite dropped 3.95% by the end of the day. The decline comes as investors adopted caution as quarterly earnings results from tech companies begin to be published this week. Fears of an economic slowdown and a more aggressive Federal Reserve have also likely contributed to the dip. Meanwhile, Google's parent company Alphabet saw its shares dip sharply after the company missed first quarter earnings expectations. Alphabet shares dropped more than 6% in extended trading following the release of its net income and revenue for quarter one. The company's earnings were lower than expected, while YouTube's growth slowed sharply compared to last year. The inflation rate that South Korean consumers expect over the next year reached its highest in 9 years. The Bank of Korea said on Wednesday that the expected inflation rate in April stood at 3.1%, up 2.2% compared to the previous month. The central bank attributed this to soaring consumer and producer prices and the supply disruption due to the war in Ukraine. But consumers are apparently optimistic about the economy for a second month in a row, following the lifting of social distancing rules. The central bank also said that its composite consumer sentiment index in April stood at 103.8, increasing 0.6% on month. A reading above 100 means optimists about the economy outnumber pessimists.
Now, Standard & Poor's kept South Korea's rating at AA. The agency said the stable outlook reflects its expectation that the country will have stronger economic growth than most other high-income countries over the next 3 to 5 years. Now, S&P does not believe geopolitical risks on the peninsula will escalate to the point of hurting the nation's economic fundamentals. The global firm kept Korea's sovereign credit rating at AA since raising it in August 2016. Now, Seoul's finance chief nominee believes the biggest challenges are slow growth, widening wealth and income gap, as well as rising debt. Now, ahead of next week's confirmation hearing, Chu Kyung-ho submitted some of written responses to questions from lawmakers. Kim Hyun-sung shares us with his insights.
The nominee for South Korea's next finance minister has highlighted what he thinks are the economy's three biggest problems. Finance Minister nominee Chu Kyung-ho, who would also serve as Deputy Prime Minister if appointed, gave the National Assembly his written response to lawmakers' questions on Monday, ahead of his parliamentary confirmation hearing. He pinpointed tepid growth, the divide between rich and poor, and the increase in household and national debt as the South Korean economy's biggest challenges. For slow growth, Chu emphasized the need to improve economic conditions. This includes loosening regulations and cutting company taxes so that markets and private firms can reach their full potential. He also said the government should let private firms steer the economy. Nominee Chu said that a private-led approach will help create jobs. Chu also mentioned that the government needs to continue to strengthen efforts to help the underprivileged. On real estate, it's likely Chu will push to reform the transfer income tax and the comprehensive real estate tax system. He said that the current tax system is heavily burdening homeowners. He intends to find a way that will stabilize the real estate market and household debt. Chu's parliamentary confirmation hearing is scheduled for May 2nd. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
It's time for Global Insights, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. Now, President-elect Yoon takes office in less than 2 weeks, and there are already winds of change taking place in South Korea's foreign policy. Saying Seoul and Washington's bilateral alliance would be the crux of his foreign policy, the incoming leader has set the tone for South Korea's diplomatic and security issues, including dealing with a nuclear north and managing South Korea's relationships in the Indo-Pacific region. Now we discuss what to expect here in the studio today. We have our Ambassador Kim Chang-bum, former South Korean ambassador to the EU and Indonesia, who served in the country's foreign service for more than 4 decades. A very warm welcome to you, Ambassador. Thanks for joining us.
Yes. It's great to be here, yes.
Yeah, lovely
wonderful
to see you.
Yes.
And of course, Professor Ramon Pacheco-Pardo, who we connect to very regularly. So pleased to see you in Seoul today. He's the Professor and Head of International Relations at King's College London and author of a book that's coming out very soon, From Shrimp to Whale, South Korea from the Forgotten War to K-pop. So lovely to see you both today. And well, my first question to you, Ambassador Kim. Now, every time there's a government change here in South Korea, the question is, when it comes to foreign policy, how are we going to deal with Pyongyang, the nuclear north? So, well, over the past few years, we've seen various approaches to this. We've seen strategic patience, fire and fury, of course, and some bromance. So all of these have seemed to fail. So what would you say is the approach going forward for Seoul and Washington?
Well, this one of the most challenging issues ahead of the incoming new Yoon administration will be how to cope with growing threats from North Korea. When President Biden will be visiting Seoul, I think this later this month, next month in May, when meeting with President Yoon Suk-yeol in Seoul, I think that they will have to discuss how to build up a united front against North Korea's missile and nuclear provocations. I think there are three, main aspects that we may have to consider. Is that one is how to take on Pyongyang from a position of strength. I think there's in the previous administration there are some criticisms about kind of the appeasement or the too much engagement approaches vis-a-vis North Korea. I think that should be rectified. That's the kind of the position that have been set up by President-elect Yoon. And the second one is how to augment and reinforce South Korea's deterrence capabilities vis-a-vis North Korea. I think we have seen this military parade just 2 days ago, and it's quite alarming. So how to cope with this increasing military capacity that will be threatening South Korea's security. And lastly, I think there's quite naturally how to kind of strengthen up the already quite rock-solid US-ROK alliance. I think that would be the key issues that would be on the horizon for both President Biden and President Yoon Suk-yeol.
I see. And Professor Pacheco-Pardo, I wonder what your thoughts are on this. How should Seoul and Washington really approach North Korea in terms of denuclearization and diplomacy?
I agree that the starting point should be that the U.S. alliance with ROK helps South Korea to be in a stronger position vis-a-vis North Korea, of course, along with its own capabilities. So deterrence is key. I do think there should be an openness to dialogue, because at the end of the day, if this issue is going to resolve at any point in the future, there will have to be engagement with North Korea. But it seems to me that the incoming Yoon government is going to take a more principled approach. It's going to say, well, we're going to have a dialogue with North Korea if North Korea takes steps towards denuclearization, talks about human rights, and covers issues that are of key interest, really, for South Korea.
I see. And well, now Ambassador Kim, moving on to some other issues. Right. So South Korea it's reached its lowest point of relations with Japan over the last few years due to historical issues and then a trade war triggered by Japan. But well, Yoon, even before entering office, he sent over a delegation though to repair ties. But there are, of course, these historical and territorial issues lingering. So how do you think they're going to be able to work through them?
Well, during the campaign period, President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol has been emphasizing the need to normalize ties with Japan. And luckily, I think this visiting delegation, high-level delegation sent by President-elect Yoon, has met with Prime Minister Kishida of Japan yesterday. I think that's quite an encouraging sign as for the improvement of relations with Japan. But of course, there are some kind of the obstacles they have to overcome, because there are some issues related with historical legacies and also the trade issues, that how to kind of deal with this export restrictions imposed by the Japanese government on key materials. And also, I think we need to have some patience in looking at kind of positive side of the whole improvement between Japan and Korea. I think there are some issues that might be giving both Korean and Japanese government to have some breathing spaces in order to have an elevated status of relations between the two countries. One is kind of Korea has decided to join CPTPP. That's trade and economic kind of framework that would be another good starting point for Japan to give some favorable approaches for Korea to join. And another one is that this Quad Plus. I think Korea is, new incoming government is showing some intention to join Quad Plus as a working group member. So that is another way for Korea and Japan to work together with. But of course, we have to overcome some of the issues that are already on the table.
And well, obviously, Washington's wanted this for a very long time. They wanted Seoul and Tokyo to get on and work in this trilateral alliance together in the region. And well, how do you see this trilateral alliance, really trilateral relationship, blooming? And how important will it be in the Indo-Pacific region?
Well, it's clearly that would be one of the hottest agenda that President-elect Yoon and President Biden of the United States will be discussing when they will have a meeting in May. This trilateral coordination and cooperation among three countries will be a key pillar for the United States to put forth their strategic kind of the direction, especially for the Indo-Pacific. And also for Korea's point of view, I think there's two-man ties with Japan are not only confined to the bilateral dimension, but also to the regional dimension, or perhaps to the global dimension, because there are so many issues that are already confronting both countries. So common challenges should be dealt with by both in a joint manner.
I see. And Professor Pacheco-Pardo, now, South Korea has made it, well, Yoon has made it very clear that Seoul-Washington ties are going to be at the center of his foreign policy, and that's really going to set the tone for South Korea's relations with other countries as well. But when you look at his transition team, his top foreign policy advisors, officials, they seem to be mostly US experts. And is there a concern that, it might be, the issues might be too tilted towards Washington?
I think that it is clear that President-elect Yoon wants to use the alliance as a starting point for Korea to have stronger relations with the rest of the world, to cooperate with the rest of the world. I don't think it's much of a concern in the sense that we see more and more cooperation at the unilateral level with the US, Korea, and other partners. So Ambassador Kim just talked about the Quad+, for example. But if we see, for example, this tech alliance that is being formed among Korea, US, countries such as Taiwan, Europe as well, Japan. So the US is always there, Korea is always there, and I think that's his intention. I believe that the campaign team, well now the transition team, is looking into broadening the areas of expertise of the members that will be joining the foreign policy, the eventual foreign policy team. And for the time being, I think it makes sense to focus on the US-ROK alliance, because that's what President-elect Yoon has made very clear is going to be the basis of his foreign policy.
Right, and Professor Pacheco-Pardo, now, Yoon has made it clear that he wants to expand South Korea's diplomatic relations as well and strengthen them, diversify them. And, well, what about the European Union? How can South Korea and the EU really come together and really leverage both their strengths and work on common areas of interest?
Well, that's a topic Ambassador Kim and I, together with Ambassador McElrater, exploring a new report that we have launched. And you actually see the interest on the European Union side to strengthen relations with Korea, because it's really one of the few partners outside of the West, so-called West, that has capabilities, same values, it's a democracy, market economy, etc., but can actually implement policies together with the European Union because it's a rich country, technologically advanced. So I think from the incoming Yoon government's perspective, working with Europe is going to be beneficial for two reasons. The first one, because Europe wants to cooperate with Korea, so there's an open door there. It doesn't have to try to convince Europe, the European Union, that cooperation is beneficial for both parties. But secondly, because the European Union can complement the strengths that Korea has. It's also a very strong economy, of course. It also has technological capabilities as well that Korea can benefit from. So I think that there are synergies between the two parties that the incoming Yoon administration can find very beneficial for its own foreign policy.
Right, and well, Ambassador Kim, how do you see this? How do you see South Korea really expanding its role in the world, and what do you hope to see it do? What kind of strengths can it leverage as it aims to be a pivotal player, as Yoon said in his article in Foreign Affairs?
Right. This Foreign Affairs article that has been released in February, I believe that President-elect Yoon has emphasized the need to step up for Korea. I mean, Korea is kind of the more responsible and more respected places in the international community. I think that's the right direction, but the question is how to translate those words into actions. I think there's one key area would be green and digital transition. Korea is also embarking on the Green Deal, and also they try to come up with more solutions for digital transformation. But that's something that we could work together with like-minded partners, whether it's United States, European Union, other even developing countries. We have to also augment our overseas development assistance. That's something that we have to give away and return back to those who are really in need. And another aspect is that we have to be really working together with like-minded partners, especially in these demanding times in view of the crisis in Ukraine and all the challenges coming from US-China rivalries, then we cannot stand alone. That's something that we have to work together with networks.
I see, becoming more active and also vocal in world affairs.
Right.
And I'm also very curious to hear what you think, because this is, well, I think it alludes to what your book will be about. I'm just telling from the title, of course, since it's not released yet. But yeah, so can South Korea go from being a shrimp to a whale? What kind of role do you see it playing?
I think it can. I mean, I think there has been a transformation in the way Korea sees itself as a foreign policy actor in recent years, and I think President-elect Yoon really wants to take a step further in this direction. And I think that the point that you mentioned about Korea being more vocal, I think from a European perspective, that's something that sometimes is missing, right? Korea does many things, but sometimes it doesn't say what it is doing. Not MOFA, for example, not diplomats, but the government itself. And I think there will be an expectation that on issues such as dealing now with Russia's aggression on Ukraine, of course, the behavior of China, human rights issues, for example, violations, behavior in the South China Sea, that Korea will be more vocal, not necessarily by itself, but together with networks, as Ambassador Kim was saying, together with partners. This could be with partners in the US, Europe, but in the Indo-Pacific as well. And secondly, that when it comes to being more vocal, that they will follow through with actions. And Korea has really been stepping up over the past 2-3 administrations, I think, from a European perspective. But it is true that I can always do more. For example, ODA, development assistance. I think that clearly Korea could be doing more. But also when it comes to diplomacy, it could be convening, for example, more networks by itself or together with others, something that Korea has maybe not done as much as it could have. And Korea is very well perceived by other countries. It's a neutral, fairly neutral actor, even though it's the alliance with the United States, but it is not trying to isolate other countries. And I think that's a good position to begin with in terms of trying to lead the networks either by itself or together with other countries.
I see. Well, I'm afraid this is all we have time for today, but thank you both so much for joining us here today. That was Ambassador Kim Chang-bom, former South Korean ambassador to the EU and Indonesia, and Ramon Pacheco-Pardo, professor and head of international relations at King's College London. Thank you again so much for your time today.
Thank you.
As the number of new COVID-19 cases decline in Korea, the death toll fell below 100 for the first time in 50 days. Authorities project daily infections to continue falling for now, but that could stop after a while. Lee Shi-woo brings us the updates.
With South Korea continuing to see an overall decline in its daily COVID-19 figures, the country on Tuesday reported 80,361 new infections. There were 82 related deaths, with the daily death toll dropping to 2 digits for the first time in 55 days. The number of critically ill patients was at 613. This comes a day after the country lifted most of its virus prevention measures, with people now allowed to eat at indoor venues, on trains, and can sample food at supermarkets. Research by Korea's Central Disease Control Headquarters found that around 56,000 people in South Korea have had COVID-19 more than once. That's about 0.347% of the people who have contracted the virus. Of those, 65 had caught COVID-19 3 times. Meanwhile, 5 out of 6 unnamed organizations that provided data and research to South Korean health authorities forecast that by May 18th, daily infections will drop to below 40,000. The number of hospitalized critically ill patients is expected to drop to under 500 after 2 weeks from Tuesday and to under 300 after 4 weeks. However, authorities noted that it is also likely that the potential emergence of new variants and a reduced effectiveness of vaccines over time may result in an increase in the number of infections.
Every week, the number of patients is decreasing by 30%. It is possible that such a decline will continue for a while, but the outlook isn't all positive. After a month or two, the decline may stop, and we may reach a stationary phase.
Authorities on Tuesday also announced that the new Omicron sublineage BA.2.12.1 found in other parts of the world has not yet been confirmed in South Korea. The sublineage is known to be 20% more transmissible than the BA.2, commonly known as stealth Omicron. It was first confirmed in the United States in December of last year. Since then, it has been found in 14 countries around the world. 이시후, Arirang News.
Now, driven by fears of a Shanghai-style lockdown, Beijing residents started panic buying food and other necessities. Now, authorities are now mass testing people in the Chinese capital, which is reporting fewer than 20 cases per day. Kim Ji-yeon has the latest.
Beijing residents are panic buying food and medical supplies as fears mount that a Shanghai-style citywide lockdown could be imposed on the Chinese capital. Beijing reported 19 new coronavirus infections on Monday, which is low by global standards, but could still trigger further measures, including lockdowns, in line with China's commitment to its zero-COVID policy. It would depend on the results of mass virus testing in its largest district of Chaoyang, of 3.5 million residents and workers who have been ordered to take tests 3 times this week. Already more than a dozen residential buildings were put under a lockdown in Chaoyang, an affluent downtown area home to embassies and international businesses.
What happened in Shanghai is understandable. That's such a big city. Even though the government made great efforts, there must have been something that was less than satisfactory. It's okay as long as they made corrections.
Shanghai has seen more than 400,000 COVID-19 cases since late March, resulting nearly 140 deaths. Residents in China's most populous city have took to social media to vent their discontent as they suffer from major food shortages and delivery delays as the city's lockdowns enter their 4th week. In Beijing, photos and videos across social media showed empty shelves at some stores as shoppers appeared to ignore assurances that the city would not suffer the same fate as Shanghai. Some of the draconian lockdown measures in Shanghai include placing electronic door alarms, forcefully evacuating people from homes to carry out disinfection procedures, and setting up green barricades outside homes without prior warning. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, the head of the World Health Organization warned that a dramatic drop in testing for COVID-19 has left the world blind to the virus's continuing surge and its potentially dangerous mutations. Speaking to reporters on Tuesday, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said COVID-19 cases and deaths had been dropping dramatically, but it could be due to the far less testing being done. Now, he added that as many countries reduce testing, the WHO is receiving less and less information about transmission and sequencing. Now, despite surging cases due to the Omicron variant in the past 4 months, testing rates have plummeted by 70 to 90% worldwide. Now, South Korea's ruling Democratic Party on Tuesday pushed through the controversial legislation on reducing and ultimately removing the investigative powers of the prosecutor's office. Now, the DP used its majority to unilaterally approve related bills during a sub-panel meeting of the Parliamentary Legislation and Judicial Committee, despite strong opposition and criticism from the main opposition People Power Party. The Democratic Party now hopes a plenary parliamentary session will be convened as early as Wednesday to pass the bill, as they aim to promulgate the revised law at President Moon Jae-in's last cabinet meeting on May 3rd. Now, for a look at news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning to you, Matthew.
Good morning to you guys.
Hi, Matthew. Let's start with a story coming out of Pakistan where an explosion has killed 4 people.
Well, that's right. According to reports, 3 Chinese teachers and a Pakistani national were killed in a bomb blast on Tuesday. Officials confirmed that the victims were returning to Karachi University by minibus when the bomb exploded in the vehicle near the entrance of the campus Chinese Language and Cultural Center. Now, the separatist group, the Baloch Liberation Army, has claimed responsibility, saying that the attack was carried out by a female suicide bomber. Photos of the reported bomber were shared by the group but haven't yet been verified by authorities. The group is known to oppose Chinese investment in Pakistan, claiming that locals don't benefit. Moving over to China, which has reported the first human infection of the H3N8 bird flu. It had previously been detected only in horses, dogs, birds and seals. Health authorities on Tuesday said the risk of the spread is low and that the bird flu strain did not yet have the ability to effectively infect humans. A 4-year-old boy was confirmed with the flu after developing symptoms on April 5th. Health officials said he had been in contact with chickens and crows, and close contacts of the boy have reportedly not been infected. China sees occasional infections of bird flu in people, usually in the poultry industry, as the country has various strains of the virus. The UN is calling for urgent action to avoid a sand crisis, as consumption has overtaken natural replenishment. In a report on Tuesday, it said demand for sand has soared to 50 billion tons a year, following global population growth and urbanization. It added that after water, sand is the second most exploited natural resource and is only replaced by geological processes that take hundreds of thousands of years. The resource is mainly used for glass, concrete and construction materials, with figures putting global use at 17 kilograms per person per day. The increase in sand harvesting is damaging beaches, reversing river flows and wiping out small islands. The UN has recommended reusing sand from recycled materials and has proposed a ban on mining sand from beaches. Football clubs Borussia Dortmund and Dynamo Kyiv helped to raise $420,000 in support of victims of the war in Ukraine. Meeting for a friendly match at the Signal Iduna Park on Tuesday, the two teams played in front of a crowd of 35,000 spectators. Ultimately, Dynamo defeated Dortmund 3-2 in the fourth match of their Match for Peace tour. The Ukrainian club are currently going around Europe playing games to raise funds for victims of the Ukraine war. Dynamo arrived in Germany having already beaten Legia Warsaw and Galatasaray, as well as drawing with Cluj of Romania. A pair of death-defying pilots managed to partially succeed in completing the first ever mid-air plane swap. Taking to the skies above Arizona on Sunday, cousins Luke Akins and Andy Farrington flew their Cessna 182s to an altitude of 4,200 meters. They then put their planes into a controlled nosedive, jumped out and each attempted to take control of the other's aircraft. Although Akins successfully swapped planes, Farrington needed to abort and parachuted to safety. Nobody was harmed in the incident. However, the Federal Aviation Administration has said they are conducting an investigation. Organizers allegedly defined a government order that requires people operating planes to remain in the aircraft and wear safety belts.
Good morning. Roller coaster spring temperatures we're having these days, from an early summer-like afternoon in the capital yesterday, nearing 29 degrees Celsius. Readings have dropped down to 13 degrees this morning. Afternoon temperatures will go down about 5 degrees lower than yesterday, but still a few notches higher than seasonal norms. Blue skies will be featured, but don't be fooled by that. Those of us in the capital will be covered with yellow dust today. We should really refrain from spending time outdoors. Dust advisory even has been issued in parts of Gyeonggi-do and Incheon this morning. Strong morning wind is expected in the central regions and Jeollado provinces, and morning lows are 1 to 4 degrees lower than the same time yesterday. And highs in central regions will be lower, but southern provinces will be a couple of degrees higher with very high UV rays this afternoon. Readings will remain in the average range with morning rain in the forecast on Friday across Korea. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
Well, that wraps up our newscast for this morning, but we will be back again same time tomorrow for our Thursday's edition of New Day at Arirang.
Thanks as always for tuning in, but do stick around for more updates throughout the day. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are, and as always, take care.
환영합니다. 웰컴 투 대구.
양배누아 대구.
하이 라이 따지오.
대구니 요코소.
알람피 대구.
Bienvenido a Daegu.
Welcome you all. For the first time in Korea, the largest conference ever, the future of green energy, World